Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you how to build the muscle layers of a muscle, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to follow along. You might have your own materials, and if you were able to gather them together. If not, then you can use my video to come up with your muscle cell or your whole muscle. And you can, if you can see that I've used some stuff that you might have and you might want to try and do it, you can too, separately. But I'm going to do it for you. And if you want to use my whole muscle for your drawing, you can. And if you want to go ahead and do your own, you can as well. So if you would turn to page 125 in your lab manual and go to exercise 8.1, which is identifying muscle layers. And if you know anything about muscle cells are kind of unusual because they're one of the only cells that are multinucleated. They start off as single cells, muscle cells that differentiate into a nucleated cell that is kind of elongated. It's a muscle fiber, and it becomes that by fusing together a bunch of skeletal cells together to become one muscle cell. These cells are multinucleated, which is different than most cells. Most cells only have one nucleus, but a skeletal cell has more than one. So what we're going to be doing today, we'll see midway through the bottom of page 125, it says procedure for building muscle layers. And you'll need a few things that hopefully you have. If not a big deal. You're going to need a toilet paper roll, which I used. I kind of trimmed mine down a little bit, but And then you're going to need some smoothie straws. I use these regular old straws and I cut them in half. So I had, you need at least 12 of them. So I've got those there. So hopefully you have some of those. And you're going to need some coffee stirrers. Now I was able and lucky to get these from the coffee shop a couple doors down, and the guy was really nice. He gave me a whole bunch of them, and so what I did is I took them and cut them in half, so I have twice as many, and they're approximately the right size to fit into the muscle fiber. You also will need some parafilm, which of course nobody has parafilm except in the lab, because what would you ever use it for? But I used contact paper instead, and I cut it in just a roll of contact paper. If you have any kind of paper that has a sticky side to it, you can use that. I used regular clear contact paper, so I cut myself some squares, like 4x4, 3x4, whatever, to wrap each of my my muscle fibers in. My fascicles in, I should say. Then you also need some plastic wrap, and if you have saran wrap, well, whatever, plastic wrap. And then I cut those also in little pieces too, so that I could wrap each of my muscle fibers. Okay, so if you want to take out your book and let's go through the supplies so you can know what each of these different materials represent. Okay. The toilet paper roll here, that's going to represent the whole muscle. And so we're going to have a bunch of muscle fibers bundled together to make up one whole muscle. And so that's what that one is. The straws are going to represent a muscle fiber. And each fiber contains many myofibrils, which we're using represented by these coffee stirrers, and so we're going to be stuffing those in there, and these are going to be the proteins or myofibrils that make up each muscle fiber. The saran wrap or plastic wrap that we used is going to be representing the endomysium, and this wraps each of the muscle fibers is wrapped with this thin layer of connective tissue to hold all of the myofibrils together, and that's what this is going to be. And then of course the connective tissue is representing the paramecium, and this is what holds our bundles, our muscle fibers together to create a fascicle. Okay, so we've got all the materials that we need here. Hopefully, let's see, what else do I? I'll put these up here so you can see what they are. This is basically all you need to do this experiment. Okay, so let's start off by getting rid of this off my stage and taking one of the straws that of course represents a muscle fiber, and we're going to be stuffing it with 3 at least 3, because otherwise you'll be like falling around in there. At least 3 of the, just a second. At least 3 of the myofibrils, and those will go into each of the muscle fibers. Okay, so I'm going to stuff those in there. You can probably fit 4 in there if you're willing to work, but I'm not going to, maybe try. Okay, so I've got my myofibrils in my muscle fiber, and then I'm going to take a piece of the saran wrap or plastic wrap, and this represents my endomysium, and I'm going to wrap each of these muscle fibers in the endomysium. And this is a very thin layer of connective tissue that surrounds each of the muscle fibers. Okay, I'm going to do that 3 more times till I have 4 muscle fibers that are all where's all the rest of my, that are all finished and ready to go to be added to a myofibril. Okay, so stuffing those myofibrils in each of my muscle fibers until I have 4 of these little things, of these little muscle fibers. Then I'm going to take my saran wrap and I'll wrap each of these fibers in this paper, in this saran wrap. Okay, there's one, and there's, where's my other? Okay, so I went ahead and wrapped these ahead of time so you guys wouldn't have to watch me struggle with the saran wrap. And so now I have myself 4 muscle fibers. Okay, so each one of these represents a muscle fiber wrapped in the endomysium. Now I'm going to take those 4 fibers and I'm going to cover them in the parafilm, or the contact paper, which represents the paramecium. So I'm taking this, open this up. See that not everything's going to go perfect here. Not that anything has so far this year. So I don't think anything's gone perfect. Okay, so I'm trying to open this paper, and I probably should have had it right. Struggle. Maybe I'll have to cut this out. I'll have to edit this. Okay, so I've got my paramecium, and I'm going to take my fibers and wrap them up tightly as a bundle, and these will represent a fascicle. Okay, so say 4. It's not always 4. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 7, but each one of these bundled together, these fibers that are bundled together by a paramecium, represents a fascicle. Now I'll make 4 of these. Continue to do that with the other the other little muscle fibers. I've stuffed them all pretty well. And I've got myself 4 fascicles now. I'm going to take my whole muscle, which is actually represents the epimysium, and this is the final outer tough, connective tissue that holds all these fascicles together. I'm going to stuff them in there, and those will represent a whole muscle, all the layers of a whole muscle. And if you want to, you can use mine, but otherwise you can do it yourself. But I'm going to kind of disassemble it so that you can see what it's made of. Okay, so we've got the epimysium on the outside. We've got these fascicles, which are each covered by parameciums. Then inside of those, we've got, shoot, I can get that. Let me see if I can get one of these out. We've got these muscle fibers, which of course are covered themselves by a thin connective tissue, which is represented by the clear plastic wrap, and those that plastic wrap represents the endomysium. And then inside of each of these muscle fibers, we have these myofibrils. These myofibrils are muscle proteins that are used to make up each of the muscle cells. So we can't put it back in. But what we end up with is a whole muscle that's made up of many layers that you can see representing a whole muscle. So there you have it. I hope that helps. If you want to do it yourself, go ahead. If not, you can use mine to draw from, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like. Those are my myofibrils. But you can see there's many bundles. I think I have 4 or 5 bundles here. And each of these bundles is a fascicle. They're wrapped by the paramecium, Each of those contain muscle fibers. Each of those muscle fibers are wrapped in a very thin layer of connective tissue, which we used plastic wrap, but those represent the endomysium. And then inside of each of the muscle fibers, we have these small little tiny fibrils or muscle proteins that make up each of the muscle fibers. So go ahead and draw those, and hopefully I'll get a little better at doing this, and I'll see you next week. Bye.